Now we'll start with the details of the Sindh Plain, the first regional classification of the northern plains. The first point we can study is that the western part of the Great Plain of Indian subcontinent, it is formed by river Indus and is known as the Sindh Plain. I have already said that in the historical past, the river Indus, this was known as the river Sindh. To the west of the river Indus, the plain is formed of Bhangar. The northern part is a clay pad desert, and the southern part is sandy to loamy. That is just the classification or the composition as per the soil content. To the east of the river, this plain is typically deltic in relief. The surface formed by recent deposition of alluvial sands and clays have remnants of the former river course in the long narrow depressions known as the Thoros. We can say that this is the characteristic feature of the Sindh Plain. Thoros, we can say that the surface formed by recent deposition of alluvial sands and clays have remnants of the former river courses in the long narrow depressions called as the Thoros. Now this was about the Sindh Plain. Now we come to the second classification, that is the Punjab Plain. First we have done the Sindh Plain. Now we will study the Punjab Plain. This part of the plain, it is formed as a result of alluvial deposited by 5 rivers, namely the Satluj, the Bias, the Ravi, the Chenab and the Jhelum. These are the 5 rivers who deposit the alluvium and form the Punjab Plain. The Punjab Plain, or the land of the 5 rivers, it was earlier named as Sapt Sindhu, the land of 7 rivers by the Aryan-speaking tribes. It is primarily made up of Doabs. Doabs means the land between 2 rivers. Doabs means land between 2 rivers, because see now here Abs means rivers and Do means 2. Do is according to the Hindi nomenclature. So Doabs refers to the land between 2 rivers. The mass of alluvium has broken by the river courses, which have carved for themselves broad floodplains of Khadar flanked by bluffs, which are locally known as Dhaya. These bluffs, as high as 3 meters or more, have been heavily gullied. The Khadar belt, known as wetlands, though liable to flooding, is agriculturally valuable. This was about the Punjab Plain. Now we will come to the Ganga Plain. The third is the Ganga Plain. The Ganga Plain, it lies in UP, Bihar and West Bengal. The deltaic part of this plain is in West Bengal and Bangladesh. This plain has been formed by the depositional work of Ganga and its tributaries like the Yamuna, the Gomti, the Ghagra, Gandak and Kosi. As it is formed by the river Ganga, or the depositional brought about by the river Ganga, it is known as the Ganga Plain. The Chambal, Betwa, Kane and Son rivers from the peninsular plateau have also contributed to the formation of this plain. This plain slopes east and southeast. The Ganga, Yamuna, Doab, Awadh and Mithila plains are its 3 important units. Ganga Plain form one of the fertile land, or one of the famous fertile land of the world, because of the deposition brought about by the river. Now the fourth plain we studied is the Brahmaputra Plain. It is also known as the Assam Plain. because it is located in Assam. This plain extends for a distance of about 640 kilometers from Dhubri to Satia. Its width varies from 90 to 100 kilometers. The entire plain has been formed by Brahmaputra and its tributaries. One of the notable features of the Brahmaputra plain or the deposition activities of the river Brahmaputra is that Majoli in the Brahmaputra river, it is the largest inhabited riverine island in the world. Located in the eastern part of India, you can very clearly find that the Majoli island. Now this was the classification of the northern plains. Now we'll study about the peninsular plateau. So in the map you can see the location of the peninsular plateau. In this map it is marked in brown color with the dots. The peninsular plateau of India forms an irregular triangle whose base lies between the Delhi Ridge and the Rajmahal Hills, and its apex is formed by Kanyakumari. This region you can locate it as Kanyakumari, and here you can find the Rajmahal Hills. Here you can locate the Rajmahal Hills. In the north are the Aravallis, the Vindhyachal and the Rajmahal Hills. In its eastern and western sides, it is represented by the Eastern Ghats. This is the region of the Eastern Ghats. It is of Eastern Ghats, and in the west you can locate the Western Ghats. Here you can locate the Western Ghats, which are marked in green color. This vast plateau, it is 1600 kilometers long in north-south direction and 1400 kilometers wide in east-west directions. The Narmada and the Tapi trough divides this great plateau into following two parts. First, it is the Malwa plateau. And second, it is the Deccan plateau. Let us mark in the map the Vindhyas, the Satpura range, Mahadev Hills, Aravalli range. This is the Vindhyan range. To the south of it, you can find the Satpura range. Near the Vindhyas, these are the Mahadev Hills. Here you can find the Mikal range, or you can call it as the Michael range also. This region, this eastern part, it is known as the Chota Nagpur plateau. Here are the Aravallis. So now we will start with the Malwa plateau. This triangular portion lying northwest of Narmada Tapi rivers and the Vindhyachal range, it is known as the Malwa plateau. In the map you can locate that this central region, this is known as the Malwa plateau. To its northwest are the Aravalli hills, and to the northeast is the Ganga plain. This is composed of hard rocks like granite and is generally 800 meters above the sea level. Its normal slope is towards northeast, as a result of which the Chambal and the Betwa rivers flowing through this part of the plateau join the Yamuna river. The further extensions of this plateau are the Bundelkhand region, the Ruhelkhand and the Chota Nagpur plateau. In the east, here you can find the Chota Nagpur plateau. Second, we come to the Aravallis. The western and the northwest flank of the plateau, it is occupied by the Aravallis. The Aravallis run for a distance of about 800 kilometers from Ahmedabad to Delhi. It reaches its maximum height of 1722 meters at Guru Shikhar in Mount Abu, having a north east-southwest axis, the Aravallis form discontinuous ridges between Gujarat and Delhi. The main hills lie in Rajasthan, having an imposing relief southwest of Ajmer. However, they fan out in parallel series of low ridges northwest of Jaipur towards Haryana. To the west of the Arabi range lie the sandy waste of the Thar Desert. This you can find it as the Thar Desert. This is an area of arid topography with a vast expanse of crescent-shaped sand dunes called as the Barkhans. So you may be asked, what are Barkhans? Barkhans are nothing but sand dunes which are crescent-shaped. Crescent means half moon shaped. Now we come to the Deccan Plateau. This is again a triangular plateau located in the south of river Tapi. Let us mark the rivers Tapi and Narmada. Below the Vindhyas over here, you can find the river Narmada. This is river Narmada. And near the Satpura ranges, you can find the river Tapi. So this region to the south of the Satpuras, this is the Deccan Plateau. Its northwest boundary is demarcated by the Satpura and the Vindhyachal ranges, while its northern border is flanked by the Mahadev and the Maikal ranges. Its western and eastern flanks are represented by the Western Ghats and the Eastern Ghats respectively. Its average altitude is 600 meters, although it rises to 1000 meters in the south and slopes downwards to 500 meters in the north. The general slope of this plateau is from west to east. That is why most of the rivers of the plateau flow from west to east. Narmada and Tapi are the two exceptions which flow from east and west. I repeat that this is a very important point, that Narmada and Tapi are the two exceptions which flow from east to west. The rivers flowing this plateau have cut deep valleys and divided the plateau into several smaller plateaus such as the Maharashtra Plateau, the Andhra Plateau and the Karnataka Plateau. These are the names as per the states. So we can say that Maharashtra Plateau, the Andhra Plateau and the Karnataka Plateau, these are the parts of the Deccan Plateau. Now we come to the Sahyadris or the Western Ghats. Students should remember that the Western Ghats are also known as the Sahyadris. It extends from Tapi River in the north to Kanyakumari in the south and forms the western boundary of the Deccan Plateau. Its total length is 1600 kilometers and its width varies from 50 kilometers in north to nearly 80 kilometers in the south. In the map you can see that the western boundary, these are the Western Ghats. It forms almost a continuous wall and can be crossed only through gaps. These gaps are the Talghat Gap, Bhorghat Gap, Palghat and Shenkota Gap. These gaps are used by rail routes. The Talghat provides rail link between Mumbai and Calcutta. The Mumbai-Chennai railway line passes through the Bhorghat and the Palghat is used by the Kochi-Chennai railway line. The western slope of this mountain, it is like a staircase which gives it the name of Ghats. The southern part of the Western Ghat is characterized by the presence of the Nilgiri, Annamalai, Cardamom Hills. The Annamudi and the Doda Beta are two important peaks of these hills. Here you can see these are the Cardamom Hills. At this point one can find the Annamudi. Here we can locate the Doda Beta. And on top of Doda Beta, here you can find the Nilgiri Hills. So let us write down the important peaks or the hills and the gaps of the Sahyadris or the Western Ghats. I've said that these form almost a continuous wall and can be crossed only through gaps. For example, the Talghat, the Bhorghat, the Palghat, and these gaps are used by the rail routes, and the presence of the hills like Nilgiris, Annamalai Hills, Cardamom Hills, and the important peaks are the Annamudai and the Doda Beta. These are important as per the examination point of view also. Now we study the Eastern Ghats. Skirting the eastern edge of the Deccan Plateau and running parallel to the eastern coast are the Eastern Ghats. This range extends from northeast part of Orissa and reaches the Nilgiri Hills in the south. This is the continuous extent of the Eastern Ghats from Orissa to the Nilgiri Hills. It is about 200 kilometers wide in the north and narrows down to 100 kilometers in the south. Its average height is about 600 meters, which is lower than that of the Western Ghats. So you should remember that the average height of Eastern Ghats, it is lower than the average height of the Western Ghats. Rivers like Mahanadi, Godavari, Krishna, Kaveri have cut through this range to reach the Bay of Bengal. Thus, it is a residual range and does not depict the real characteristic of a mountain except between Mahanadi and Godavari. In the south, the Eastern Ghats merge with the Western Ghats near the Nilgiri Hills. Locate the Nilgiri Hills. Here, the Eastern Ghats merge with the Western Ghats. So, the actual location of Eastern Ghats, it is somewhat like this. Curved part and not the lower part. This is the actual location of the Eastern Ghats, and near the Nilgiris, they merge with the Western Ghats. So forget about this region of the Eastern Ghats. Now we make the difference between the Western Ghats and the Eastern Ghats. So Western Ghats run parallel to the western coast in a north-south direction from River Tapi to Kanyakumari. In case of Eastern Ghats, it runs in the northeast to southwest direction parallel to the eastern coast from Orissa to Nilgiri Hills. The second point of difference is that the Western Ghats have an average elevation of 900 to 1100 meters above sea level, while in the Eastern Ghats, the average elevation is less than that of the Western Ghats and it is about 600 meters above the sea level. The average width of Western Ghats, it is 50 to 80 kilometers, while in case of Eastern Ghats, it is wider than Western Ghats with a width varying from 100 to 200 kilometers. Another point of difference is that the Western Ghats stands like a continuous wall and can be crossed through passes only, while in case of Eastern Ghats, it has been divided into several parts by large rivers which have made their passage through this range up to the sea. So we can say that Western Ghats have a structural unity which is lacking in the case of the Eastern Ghats. Another point of difference is that the Western Ghats are the source of many large rivers which flow in the peninsular India. In case of Eastern Ghats, no big river originates from the Eastern Ghats. And the last major point of difference is that the Western Ghats are almost perpendicular to the southwest monsoon coming from the Arabian Sea and causes heavy rainfall in the west coastal plain. We can write down that these are perpendicular to the southwest monsoon coming from the Arabian Sea. In case of Eastern Ghat, it is almost parallel to the monsoons coming from the Bay of Bengal and does not cause much rainfall. We study in the chapter on climate that Indian monsoon has two branches. One branch advances from the Arabian Sea and the another branch advances from the Bay of Bengal.